You have to lose your fear of failure. Failure is a part of the process. People who never fail, never try. You have to fail. You got to get it wrong to get it right. You learn nothing from winning. You only learn from your failures.
All right, so welcome back. Last week was an exciting video where we finally got this thing to a roller. That means that this week we get to almost start fresh. The garage is clean, the car rolls, it goes up and down. What's left? So we need to start working towards finalizing the frame, okay? We have a couple of things that we need to address. That way we can move forward with putting the flooring in the car. Once the floor gets in the car, the back seats get in the car and everything, we're gonna be that much closer towards this thing really starting to come together. On this rear, we can't start the fenders until we make sure it's centered. So that's why it's so important to basically finalize all of this. That way we can start doing sheet metal work and we know exactly where everything's gonna fall at. So on the rear, we want to make sure that we have enough upwards travel. We've laid frame right now. The frame rails are pretty much almost on the ground. They're not quite on the ground because the bags are out. Let's drop the bags and go all the way down, and then we're gonna see how high they go up, and if we have enough up and down movement, then where they're sitting at right now, height-wise, will be perfect, meaning our decking boards would have worked. So that means that this thing held air for over a week. That is pretty much frame on the ground almost. Looks like we're actually about like an inch off the ground because the tires are hitting up in the wheel wells. Nothing I can do about that. I think we're gonna extend the rockers on the back side. I'm excited also to put bumpers on this car. Move on. All right, so that's all the way up. Let's see how many inches we have off the ground from the pinch weld. 2 3/4, 2 1/2. So we might need a little bit more, which I think we'd be fine to extend them airbag mounts down. Let's drop it again and let's try like a 2x4. We need to take some pressure off the bags with a jack. All right, so all we're doing is replacing the decking boards with 2x4s. And that makes the bag mount a little bit lower. Now let's see when we let this jack down, if it drops. I mean, it should squish the bags way down. Yep. Let's check the wheels. So the wheels are still completely bagged all the way out. Now let's see how high the car will go up. So now we have 3 inches off the ground. All right, so we're gonna see if we can get this thing to do 2 2x4s and still lay frame. Let's take a jack out. Jack's actually wanting to make them a little bit crooked. That puts us at basically 4 inches. I like that a lot better. The only problem we have with this is that the higher we go, the more it's actually pushing back into all of the structure that we made in the previous video. So some of this stuff might actually have to get notched out for clearance, and that's what we're kind of looking at now, because we got to be able to swing the rear end down, and clearly that's not going to work. So we're going to have to do a little bit of massaging in here. All right, so the Slam Specialty specs say 12 inches max height. So we're only at like 10 and a half. So there's still a little bit more that we could go. We just can't go there right now because the limiting factor is our home air compressor versus once we get the actual air system in, we'll be good. It says minimum 2.7 collapsed. We're at about 3.5 to 4. I measured it when I just lowered it down. So I think we're within spec. We're right there at 10 and a half off the ground. We're already 4 inches with the rocker off the ground. So I think that's plenty. I think we'll be okay. I think fix the little clearance on the back, which we had already talked about. That could be an issue. And I think we'd be solid. All right, so we've used this scissor jack right here with a ratchet. Scissor jacks are something you definitely go to your local pick and pull, whatever, yank them, because you're gonna need them for your build. To push this rear end left to right, because I'm by myself, obviously, the rear end's very heavy. So now that we got this thing at ride height, I have 2x4 and a 4x4 under the frame rail. That's ride height, if you remember in the previous videos. So we've centered this thing where to the center, using a plum bob off the pinion, we have 16 and an 8 that way. And to our frame rail, we have 16 and 8. Remember, our frame rails were at the chassis table at the beginning. Frame rails is what everything built off of, so frame rails is what everything's squared off of. So the pinion is now centered on the frame rails. So now what we could do, let's see here, let's let go of this. The pinion is moving. Let's take pressure off that. We'll probably have to push that out a little bit more. But now we can line, move the 8. So we need to go 16 and a quarter, spring back. We will be able to loosen our U-bolt right here and make the spacing of this arm off the frame rail equal to what this arm off the frame rail is. Try to get them equal. If we can have them running parallel with the frame rail, that would be amazing. But even if we can't, you hear how the tire moved? That's what that scissor jack does. It just effortlessly pushes it for you. 16 and an 1/8. 16 and an 1/8. And that's with the pressure off the scissor jack. Perfect. All right. So now we just want our, if possible, our trailing arms to run parallel with the frame rail. Now the factory C10 trailing arms, they kind of angle in, but that's because they're mounted way out there towards the brake rotor, so everything can articulate. I asked Mike about it yesterday, and he said the reason why we did it like this is because we have such a small window in here. Our inside distance between our trailing arms is 20 and a half inches. Okay, so he said that he builds 4-link bars and ladder bars, I think 18 to 20 inches, so that everything can articulate still. So we're like dead on the money. From the factory, the C10 trailing arms, if you know how far the spread is, leave it in the comments. But I'm pretty sure Mike said he's done a few of them, that they're pretty close. So they're probably about 15-ish, 15, 17, somewhere around there, 18. And us being at 20 and a half, it just wasn't worth putting any bend in them. So we kind of created a box versus the traditional angle in. But our arms are mounted way closer to the pinion versus being mounted to the outside brakes, meaning everything can still kind of move like this, is the goal. All right, no test run. We framed it, it fits. Let's hit go time and let it rip right out the gate. First one in a while. All right, so what we're doing here is we're laying out our cross member that our airbag plates are going to go on. I've took all of my brackets and marked center lines on them. I put them all together actually. Marked all of them. That's our fourth one right there. So now I'm just setting the height on these. All right, because of the way the plasma cutter cuts that at an angle, if you just butt that up against that, then this side's going to be down, that side's going to be up. So we're doing it like this. That way I can come in here with a level. Like that. Then we've got our center line. It makes for a pretty level piece. It's a big gap that we got to weld up. It's just the way the cut is. So that's our center line. That's on there. Okay. Do the outside one. Make sure it's turned right. This one, being this cut is like this, and this round tube is like this will fall down deeper. Hopefully that makes sense. So this is the one that has the gap. And once we get the plasma table paid off, we're actually going to order the actual plasma cutter, not the hand torch, because the hand torch doesn't cut as great, but the actual cutter piece is a lot more money. See how that drops down and then that levels out? So that's going to be that right there. That's centered. Yep. Now we'll go sit this in the car and then tack weld our airbag pieces on. See, these can turn about like that. I mean, you could be off just a little bit. So that's where we need to actually bolt these to the airbag. And then that way we can get the indexing correct. We're using the airbags to lift it into place. So that's what we want to go right underneath the bottom. Flush right there. Flush right there. And all we're going to do is just tack the location. As long as we can get a good crank on it, which we can. You just gotta want to test all this, all right? With the welds, you just want to be fast in and out. You don't want to burn the airbags. Boy, that's not bad at all, son. You gotta let this thing cool down. It's piping hot. Saturday afternoon. Took quite a bit of time today with family for Mother's Day. It's early. Sunday's actually Mother's Day, but you like to celebrate Mother's Day for your mother or for your kid's mother on Mother's Day. So my mother and the rest of the family, we do on Saturday. So we took a little bit of time for that. Tomorrow won't be too busy out here, but at least there's our upper bag plate welded all up. It's pretty cool. It's looking good for sure, so can't wait to get that in. And then tonight we actually have to recut our track bar tabs that we just cut. Sometimes you miss the shot, especially when you're learning. So you can see that's not going to work. The tab's too big, so tab needs to be like that. That way this can still move around through the bolt hole. So got to remake that tonight because that is incorrect. All right, so we recut our track bar tabs this morning. This is what they ended up looking like. Okay, all tacked on off of our arm and tacked on back there at the box. Now, this is one section that I have really struggled with mentally. And when you start building, okay, somebody can tell you to do something, but if you're like me, you like to understand it. And then sometimes even when you think you understand it, you still second guess yourself. So what the track bar does is it goes from this hole to this hole, track bar or track locator bar. Locates the track of the car, tracking. So that's gonna rack this box, basically. This box that's made from the crossbar up like that and axle, that's a box. So putting a 45 in there, if you push on it, it's gonna rack the rear end this way. If you pull on this bar, it's gonna rack the rear end that way. So that's gonna center the rear end up in the frame rails. Now mentally, I understand that. I can explain that to y'all and everything. But then sometimes I second guess myself and I say, what keeps it from swaying that way or swaying that way? Or what keeps the car from coming this way and, closing this up and making contact with it? And well, the truth is that this is a box with a 45 brace in it. So being it's a box with a 45 brace in it, it can't go left or right. And being our frame rail is braced all over the place, the frame rail can't go left and right. So this square box should move up and down inside of the big square box, which is the frame rails. Same thing as a ladder bar car on a race car. Now our actual bar itself turned out pretty decent. I am tigging up as much as I can just to try to get the practice, okay? I'm still definitely not that great at it, but I'm pushing myself to continue to learn. Man, this sucker's still hot. And slowly over time, I know I'll get better at it. So while this cools down, I think we're gonna move into our airbag mount. Go ahead and get that installed. And then by the time that's in, we should be able to move back, put the track bar in, then let that cool, bolt the airbags up. And then I think that is going to be it on the rear suspension for the most part until everything gets taken apart. Now, when the body comes off the car, that is the moment, actually, we'll have to do it before, But eventually when the body comes off the car, we're gonna be cutting right here. So you see this? We'll go ahead and cut this straight down here in the home garage. And then we're gonna be adding a gusset, okay, that caps this together. So it's gonna be a curved one that goes up. I've already designed it in Fusion 360, okay? It's gonna plate it. We'll take the plasma cutter to the shop because I don't have enough air compressor at the house. And once we plate this joint right here, we're gonna actually cut the back of this frame rail curve. So this rear frame rail is gonna end up curved. We'll straight cut it here at the house since I don't have enough air. And then everywhere there's joints like this, where two rails meet together, we will put gussets across them, plate them to make them extra strong. There's no reason to do all that here at the house because, well, it's hard to get to with the body on it and everything, and I didn't want to do it when we put the stuff together just in case we needed to go back and cut it apart. It's easier to cut that joint right there straight across and do whatever you need to do with it than having to cut that straight across, plus you've already plated it, now you have a plate stuck to everything. So that's why we have not supported that, but that will be supported once the frame goes into the final welding stages. We did move our cross member back. So if you remember, we had this one drilled, okay, where it goes straight through there. There's still room. We got to re-drill it to put a hole through here, but we had to move the cross member back 1.5 inches because I did miss my measurement. So when I test fitted up this rear fender yesterday, I noticed that the wheel was not centered of this opening. We were also hitting on that inner box, and I knew that originally I thought it was going to clear, so I double checked the measurement. That's how I found that the wheel actually needed to come forward 1.5 inches at ride height. Now it's going to change whether it goes forward and backwards at slammed or max height, but ride height, it needed to be center of that opening. That was 1.5 inches. So I talked to Mike and I said, well, why don't we just cut these arms in half, take 1.5 inches out of them, basically sleeve them and plug them, put them back together. That's going to be the easiest solution. He said, no, I would remake the saddles right there, because if you remember in the previous videos, these saddles come off of this, but then you're going to have to, if you move your axle forward, you can remake the saddle easy, but now you got to re-drill the U-bolt holes and they have to go forward 1.5 inches. If you recall in the control arm video, everything is gusseted right here at these U-bolts. So that was going to be a lot of work. That's when he come up with the idea. He said, why don't you just move your cross member forward 1.5 inches? It was only welded on one side and tacked on the other side. And that's why we did that, in case we messed up, because I do know that I make mistakes. And so that's what we did. We scooted that forward. That doesn't affect anything, doesn't hurt anything negatively. If anything, it helps, because the farther forward this cross member is, as far as under the drive shaft, the less likely we are going to be to have to cut that cross member. The way it looks right now, I don't think that cross member is going to have to be cut at all. I think that's going to be able to stay solid. When the body comes off, we have everything laid out. More than likely, we will get gussets right here on this side, not that side because there's bolts, but this side will more than likely do some fancy gussets to gusset that up, and we'll go through and just gusset everything that could possibly need some extra strength. Everywhere there's a 90, honestly, we might put one really thick gusset just to make everything strong. So there's going to be some stuff that's added if you're curious whenever the frame comes off, and that's when we're literally going to just be running braces, running gussets, running caps, and just welding all the tiny stuff, and get that thing through paint and body and all that at the very end. All right, to install this crossbar, to make sure we get it perfect, it's as simple as turning the valve just a little bit. And we're gonna use the airbags because they'll go up straight to lift it right up into place like that. It's pretty flush on the bottom. It's pretty flush on the bottom. So that gives us literally perfect. You know, we don't have to worry about it being forward and backwards because the airbags shake and then they settle. Being it's got a tiny bit of spacing on the left and the right, they settle to exactly where they want to be. And man, that is a freaking good looking setup right there. Now that this setup is done, I want to point out again some key things, how I like designing stuff when I'm thinking about it. Hopefully this will help you with your project. My upper mount is permanently mounted. It's going to be completely welded in and it can't be changed. So how about if you want a longer airbag for more lift in the rear, and for some reason maybe you want to put a trailer on it, start doing, you know, hauling a little like drag and drive setup, even though it's not drag racing. That's the reason why I made the bottom one where it unbolts from the controlling arm. A, so you can drop the rear end, but B, if you need to change the height, you can remake this box down here. You'll have to redesign it, but you can remake it, and that way there's no cutting or, you know, anything out of the car and having to re-weld things back into the car. You simply just remake that lower box. All right, so we got all this cut back. You can see how we kind of gave this a bump out shape to the top of the seat pan, okay? So I put a bar in here and then I just dollied it around it. This is the thicker metal right here that's arched underneath here. So that's why we wanted to take this thinner sheet metal and bend it back. Originally it come down and we were sloped out to about right here, all right? Remember how we didn't have a ton of foot room? So we've gained ourselves a bunch of foot room because now I'm hoping to basically kind of come down straight right here so that when you're sitting in there, basically it gives your heel farther room to go back. So before we were, let's see here, we were out to here and that was our heel touching the seat pan. Now I'm hoping we can get our heel to like here and that'll give us like 3 more inches or so. Hopefully it helps. Every little inch does. This will be straight and then it'll be broke over. That way we can spot weld along this and then probably put some more tacks to really tie that piece together, and then in here it'll get funky and we'll just have to kind of make that in there. But this is all I want to do on the bench right now. And then I can have Troy, our upholstery guy, when he does the seat bottom, to make sure we're not too fat in the front. Make sure that we can slide completely back into the seat, or the kids can at least, you know, and that it's not bringing their little legs too far forward. So if we need to take some padding or bolster out of the front of the seat, let's definitely do that. But I still wanted to keep the factory distance from the seat edge back. I just didn't want to lose this foot room in here. And then we'll make our floor pans now up to it, because if you remember, our floor pans have to be remade because they need to be extended and the B-roll needs to be fixed. So that's our first pan. I think that's all I'm going to do on the bench, possibly. We're going to go ahead and sit it in there and then start final making stuff. And if we can tack some stuff in and pull it out one more time and final weld on the bench, then we'll do that. But I think that's the final cut on that piece. All right, so here is where a lot of people have been waiting for. What all did we mess up on? With all the suspension movement of this car, it was very hard to predict 100% where everything was going to move. And especially with this car being extreme of there being like no clearances at all. So of course we have mistakes. Of course we have surprises. Now, one thing that I am surprised about is I just put this ratchet strap on here and I didn't think about this. Our drive shaft, I was seeing if it would clear this tunnel right here. What happens is the drive shaft actually doesn't it doesn't come up as much as I thought. And the reason why is because as the rear end comes up, the pinion dives down because it's mounted to that. So it actually lowers the drive shaft as the rear end comes up, almost keeping the drive shaft about in the same spot, because the pinion is not necessarily, it's not rising as much as that axle because of how it rotates, if that makes sense. So super surprised about that. You're gonna have no clearance. I put the ratchet strap on the top of the transmission yoke, ratchet strap on the top of the rear end yoke, and I can tell just roughly that we're gonna have plenty of room even with the 4 or 5 inch drive shaft. We shouldn't have an issue. Now, one thing that I am surprised about that kind of took me for a loop is the mount the tires come forward now. So the tires do come forward a decent amount, and they do get into these plates. Now, we didn't know where these inner panels were going to fall 100%. That's why they're not spot welded. If you noticed, we stopped spot welding right there. There's no spot welds there. The reason why there is no spot welds there is because I knew that we weren't 100% accounted for that. I knew that we accounted for the top because that's bagged height. That's height that don't, you know, we can't do nothing else for that. And especially with how the body line is in the window, we can't really take no more out. So that was pretty much max. But we didn't know 100% on the fronts. We also had an issue, if you recall in a couple previous videos, putting the rear seats in on the little tiny tabs. We don't have a lot of room. The width of the rear seat is almost the width of the freaking rims inside to inside. So we don't have a lot of room to mount them up. So we knew we were going to have to finesse something there. We knew we were going to probably have to make some cuts on the sheet metal and get this out and kind of remake basically the front half of this tub. But now with the curveball of this tire coming forward about an inch more than I expected, we're going to go ahead and just cut on the lines and completely redo the front half of this, and then we'll just overlap the front half of this tub and we'll build it all in. So honestly, I'm pretty happy with myself. Not a lot of time wasted at all. You know, little minor stuff, moving the crossmember, maybe it was a 30-minute setback. And then this is, you know, not going to be bad at all. We didn't make any panels for here, so they still had to be made. We didn't really spend too much time making the inner panels, so they still had to be made anyway. The only thing we're going to have to remake is just this, which is just a simple 90-degree bend and shrinking and stretching. So let's get that cut out. Let's go ahead and get them flaps out the way, because that is what the tires are sitting on to keep this thing from laying all the way down. Now you can see it's not touching the top, but it is crammed into the front, and all the weight of the body is actually on that panel right now. Now we do have tons of room though for our tire forward. So that's the inner panel, this is the outer panel. We left the inner panel extremely long for room on the interior, plus so we could trim back to this, you know, to see where it eventually met. So you can see we got tons of room on the outside of the car, which was very important to make sure we have. We just knew that we were going to need to adjust the interior. Well, we have all that cut back where nothing's hitting, but we're still not laid out, and we're supposed to be crammed into that to even get anywhere near. That's how far we are off from being bagged if you look at the top of that 2x4. All right, so where's our problem at? That's what I can't figure out. I'm looking everywhere. I'm like, what is hitting? What changed? What went wrong? Why are we now not laying out? Just last weekend in the driveway, we were laying out. Well, I found it. So when I built my upper airbag mounts this morning, or yesterday when I designed them, I measured from here to the top of the rail. That was the spacing we figured. We used the 2x4s. We went into all that, the importance of using that to figure it out. But then when I welded it in, I changed it up kind of. Originally, we were going to put bars up here, and that's what I measured off of, and then I kind of changed it, and I went flush down here, and so now we have this gap up here, which I really like. I like the way that looks. However, there's where we lost our height. So that gap right there above that, I think that's what's holding us up. So thankfully I'm smart enough now. I've been doing this fab stuff long enough that I know not to weld everything 100% in. All we gotta do is cut them front welds loose real fast with a cutoff wheel, and that bar should go all the way to the top and then I think we'll be able to completely lay frame. I think. Let's get that cut loose. Let's try it. So I don't really like watching YouTube as background, but how about the old Detroit Muscle and Power TV and all that? It's funny because them guys always make it look like it's so easy, and they say that it's not easy, and sometimes they try to show you how it's not so easy, but they never ever show mistakes. I understand it's a TV show and people probably won't watch if there's mistakes, but this is the real world. This is how stuff really happens. It's a lot to build a whole car, so don't get frustrated if you mess up. It's not a big deal. Just make sure you set yourself up for mistakes. So I've got it cut loose. We definitely got a gap weld up now on that side. But now that it is all the way up, like I designed the brackets, okay, not only does our airbag squish look better, it's not as squished, but we are back almost completely laid out. This side's not quite all the way down. Not quite all the way down on the frame either, but the other side is completely touching. So now all it's going to be is just fine tuning, finding what's hitting, finding what's limiting. See, that one's hitting the inner sheet metal, so that needs to be cut. But we are laid almost, or pretty much 100% on the inside there, because this lip right here actually slopes downhill like that. We need to probably hammer it up a little. But now it's just going to be up and down and fine tuning and trimming. We don't really have to redo nothing. We just got to final fit. I mean, when you're dealing with something this tight, you're gonna have, fine tuning. All right, so we got it. We're touching there. We're touching on the other side. And for our stainless sliders that we talked about many videos back, we are 1 inch off of bagged. So all the way to the car is resting on that. Now here's where our sliders come in to protect the paint. All right. So between the frame rail and the ground, which is the top of the 4x4, that's 1 inch. Well, it's actually like 3/4 to 7/8. That way we could put 1 inch thick stainless or 1 inch thick aluminum blocks, basically 1, 2, 3 under the rails. When this thing comes off, we flip the chassis upside down and countersink some screws. That way when this thing lays out, it lays on basically 1 inch thick pucks, either stainless or aluminum, whatever I decide. And then we'll bolt into the bottom of the frame so it don't scratch the paint. Make sure our bolts and our tanks clear. If you remember when we put the tanks in, remember how the bolt head actually stuck past the frame by about 1/4 inch to 3/8? That clears all that. That's that last little bit that we need, is when them spacers go on the bottom of the frame rails. So that fixed it. Moving ours piece back up. I can get the bags covered back up and weld them in, and then we can move forward. All right, the next task, this has been a issue from the start, is the clearance on this. We need to bolt our back seat to this tab right here. If you remember, we have fought with this the whole time, trying to get enough room, and it's just not happening. All right, you can see it's just not happening. So we're gonna have to modify the seat so that we can move the bolt inwards. So we need to take this pan out, and we need to trim this line back to here. We need to cut this thing straight up through here. We're gonna keep this little tiny point right here so we know the height. We don't wanna lose the height. And then we're just gonna have to completely remake that seat point mount now to fit the tire, because now that we are doing final fit up, it's just how it is. So kind of hit the brick wall Sunday afternoon, Mother's Day, I think I'm gonna call it. That means next video on this car is gonna be back sheet metal work. Hopefully we'll get these rear pans 100% welded in. We'll move into the floor pans up front, and we will finish our front seat brackets on the other side and get our seats bolted in, and then we're gonna move into fitting for the steering column and ordering it, and just finalizing this interior, getting ready for upholstery come the end of summer.